The first round of the playoffs is officially in the books, and four drivers see their championship chances fade away. Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Bristol Motor Speedway, the last great coliseum of racing, Thunder Valley, the world's fastest half mile, all the names you want to give it. It's definitely been a track where a lot of fans pack in to watch these guys go at it for 500 laps. And this past Saturday night, it was an elimination race that saw 12 drivers advance the next round and 4 drivers be eliminated from the playoffs. And one driver who advanced himself the next round dominated the competition. Let's get into all that went down in Thunder Valley. Number 1, Larson dominates Bristol. Kyle Larson put on a butt whooping on Saturday night, winning the Bass Pro Shops night race at Bristol Motor Speedway, beating out Chase Elliott, Bubba Wallace, Denny Hamlin, and Christopher Bell for the victory. Nobody had anything for Kyle Larson on Saturday night. He started on the front row outside of his teammate Alex Bowman, and then he took the lead at about lap 35 of the race and pretty much dominated the rest of the way. The only laps that Kyle Larson didn't actually lead were during yellow flag conditions when somebody else was, pitting on the front straightaway versus him, and he was pitting another side. Or it was on one of the restarts at the end of stage 2 when Tyler Reddick elected to stay out to pick up some track position and get some stage points with the amount of laps we had left at that stage. But besides that, Kyle Larson was absolutely dominant and untouchable the entire night. He pulled out to as far as 5 to 6 seconds in the lead and just dominated the race and was en route and went on the way to get his 5th win of the season. And how dominant was Kyle Larson? He led 462 of 500 laps. That's how good he was on Saturday night. If he can bring that type of speed in these next couple of races, who's to say, who could beat him? He's just that good in NASCAR right now. He just was absolutely dominant on Saturday night. The Cliff Daniels and the number 5 team had that car hooked up the entire night. I mean, he had no competition from the rest of the field behind him. And even when he got into lap traffic, he was still able to break away once he was able to thin himself through the heavy lap traffic, and everybody else behind him that was trying to catch up had to go through that same traffic that he had to deal with. I mean, just an absolute dominant night by Kyle Larson and the 5 team. And of course, how he started the playoffs in this is pretty crazy. He got that wreck on the last lap of stage 1 in Atlanta. That ended up with him finishing in 37th. Then he rebounded to get a top 15 last weekend at the Glen. And then Saturday night just kicked the competition in the rear end, winning both stages and the race itself. A clean sweep of the night for the 5 team. Now they're on to the next round of the playoffs, and let's see if they can carry the momentum from that win all the way through. So, big congrats to Kyle Larson and the 5 team. Number 2, Briscoe and Suarez advance. Chase Briscoe and Daniel Suarez were able to advance through the round of 12, doing what they needed to do on Saturday night. And it's pretty interesting given the circumstances that both these guys had to deal with during these playoffs. Let's kick things off with Chase Briscoe. How he started the playoffs. As I mentioned, Kyle Larson was involved in a wreck at the end of stage 1 at Atlanta. Chase Briscoe was a part of that wreck and left him in a hole entering the Glen. But he was able to overcome the adversity from that first race of the playoffs wreck and carry that with a 6th place finish and solid stage points last week at Watkins Glen. And he carried that momentum into Saturday night's race at Bristol, where he ran top 5, top 6 pretty much the entire night. He had a really, really good race car, particularly when it came to the long runs. But on the last pit stop of the race, they had a slow stop where they lost some track position and fell all the way back to 14th. And I was a little bit concerned considering that they didn't have many points to carry them through these playoffs. And I was worried about the safety buffer that they had because they entered the night 6 points above the cutoff line and had scored some stage points. But you don't know how the rest of your competition who is racing you to try to get into the top 12 was going to fare. But Briscoe, despite that, was able to claw his way back inside the top 5. And then I think as the longer the run got, his tires began to fall off and he ended up fading to an 8th place finish. But it was still enough for Briscoe to advance and keep Stewart-Haas Racing alive in their last year as an organization to try to win this championship. So a big shout out to Chase Briscoe and the 14 team. And then we have Daniel Suarez. Boy, oh boy, I think they are lucky as all get out to advance to this next round of the playoffs. Now, to start the playoffs, they were able to come away with a solid 3rd place finish at Atlanta, nearly completing the sweep after winning this year's spring race. Then, of course, at the Glen last week, they were able to come away with a solid top 15 finish. But Saturday night, pretty much the entire weekend, they just did not have it in their race car. They didn't qualify well. He wasn't happy with the car in practice, and he struggled all night. He didn't get as high as 28th at all. He finished 31st, 4 laps down. That car was not good. It doesn't help at all, especially when you qualify deep in the field, and it's so tough to pass with this car on this track unless if there's a massive tire fall off, which there wasn't on Saturday night. Suarez couldn't do anything back there. He was just stuck and just hanging on and hoping things would go his way, and maybe he would somehow be able to squeak into the next round of the playoffs on points. But things did go his way when some other guys ran into some problems, and that was able to help Suarez get a few extra spots that he needed to build himself a buffer, and that was enough to get Suarez into the next round of the playoffs. So a sigh of relief for the 99 team, but they cannot have bad races like that in these next 3 races. They've got to be consistent. They got to keep the momentum up because they've run well so far to start the playoffs. But Saturday night, you do not want to have races like that at all, especially in this upcoming round when you got 1.5 on the circuit, one of the top super speedway tracks, and of course the Roval. You got to be on your A game. But despite all that, Daniel Suarez, the 99 team, advanced. So a big congrats to Briscoe and Suarez on advancing. Number 3, 4 men are done. 4 drivers at the end of Saturday night would be eliminated from the remaining races of the playoffs. And sadly, those 4 drivers are Ty Gibbs, Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski, and Harrison Burton. Those 4 drivers will no longer be eligible to compete for the championship in the rest of these races of the playoffs. Let's start things off with Ty Gibbs, who came into the night 6 points above the cutoff line and was running well at the beginning of the race. He got some points in stage 1, feeling like it was going to help him and his cause to advance into the next round. But things went south right after that stage ended, because when everybody came down pit road for their first pit stop of the night, Ty Gibbs got caught for speeding on pit road and had to restart at the back end of the pack, the last car in the lead lap, and he had to try to fight his way back up through the field. And given where he was back there, and given the racing that night where it was so tough to pass, especially deep in the pack, because up at the front of the field, maybe first through 6, they have pretty good clean air that they can be able to pass and, battle out with other guys. Where deeper in the pack, when you get to 12th on back, it's really difficult to pass guys. And and Gibbs really had a tough time back there trying to pass guys. It would take a couple of cautions and some pit stops for him to gain at least a few positions back. Then he found himself inside the top 10 with under 150 laps to go. However, he was still a few points behind Suarez because of the speeding penalty that prevented him from getting any stage points in stage 2. And late in the race, when he was racing hard with the 99 of Suarez, who was laps down, I don't understand why Gibbs was doing that. I guess he was just trying to get to the competition up front and trying to make sure he could get as few more positions as he could. Unfortunately, I think that cooked his tires, and he ended up fading late and finished outside the top 10 and the top 15. And therefore, Ty Gibbs has officially been eliminated from the playoffs. Well, he was able to make the playoffs in his second full year of the Cup Series, which is a pretty incredible accomplishment, but I wish they could have done better. If they didn't get that speeding penalty, I think the stage points that they would have been able to hold with track position in stage 2, if they'd been up there, it would have been enough to get him in. But sadly, that is not the case. Then we go to his teammate Martin Truex Jr. in his final year of the Cup Series. Sadly, he will also not be advancing. And it's not for lack of effort. The 19 team brought another fast race car Saturday night at Bristol. They got stage points in both stages and looked like things were going to go Martin's way, because as the race continued on, he was above the cutoff line by just a couple of points, but it would be enough for him to advance. But in the final caution of the race, when Corey LaJoie writes, when everybody came down pit road, Martin Truex Jr. got the same penalty that his teammate Ty Gibbs did, and unfortunately, it was the worst time possible at the last caution of the race. He got caught for speeding and had to restart at the back of the pack. And just like Ty Gibbs, Truex couldn't go anywhere. He couldn't pass anybody. He was just stuck back there. Again, when your car gets pinned in that deep of the traffic, you can't really do much. And sadly, he fell a lap down and finished 24th. And given how rough the first 2 races went for him, and the result of Saturday night, he will not be able to have a chance to win one more championship in his final season, which definitely sucks. I think a lot of us really wanted Martin Truex Jr. to continue on try to make another run in his final year of the Cup Series. I mean, at least he made the playoffs, given how, close it was from him not making it, given the fact that he wrecked early at Darlington. I thought he wasn't going to make it at all, but thankfully, fortunately for him, Chris Buescher didn't score many stage points in that race, and that allowed Martin Truex Jr. to lock himself in. So He got in the playoffs in his final year, but sadly, MTJ will not be able to compete for the championship. But that doesn't mean he can try to finish his final full-time season on a high note. So, Martin, go win one more race, buddy. We're all pulling for you. Then we've got Brad Keselowski, a former Cup champion in his third year with RFK Racing, has revamped the team and revamped himself as well. His third year of the team, he's made the playoffs 2 out of those 3 years. This year he got in on the win at Darlington, but things didn't really go his way in these playoffs. They didn't really perform well at Atlanta, didn't finish well last weekend at the Glen, and Saturday night they just did not show up at a track where Brad Keselowski has been known to run very well. He finished top 10 there earlier this year or something. I was really surprised to see him struggle like that. It's very uncharacteristic of the 6 team, but there's still a lot to be proud of for the 6 team in the way that they performed this year. The last couple of races, though, didn't really go their way, but now they can try to finish the season as strong as they can and get ready for next year. I think next year they'll be much more competitive and hopefully a little more consistent than the last few weeks. But can't blame the 6 team for giving it their best. And then finally, we have Harrison Burton, the Cinderella story of the playoffs, who was able to win at Daytona and advance into these playoffs in his final year with the Wood brothers because he will not be back with this team next year. Sadly, the playoffs were just pretty much a punch in the nose for him. They ran well at Atlanta, but wrecked out in the last lap. They had a tire issue late at Watkins Glen and finished deep in the pack. And they just did not have a good car on Saturday night, and to make matters worse, they had to pull the car behind the wall because of a power steering problem. And Bristol is the worst place you can have, other than maybe a road course, to have power steering problems where you're having to manhandle the race car. And they had to pull it behind the wall, and right there, that was the nail in the coffin for the 21 team. We knew coming in that they needed to win to get in, and it just wasn't going to work their way. But there's still, I think, some things to take away from Harrison Burton of the playoff experience, because who knows, he could find himself back in the Cup Series eventually. Because this weekend he announced that he'll be going back to the Xfinity Series next year, driving for AM Racing. Hopefully down there he can build his confidence back up, and maybe an opening down the road in the Cup Series will allow him to get back up there and maybe get a very competitive ride and showcase that he still can get the job done. So, unfortunately, the end has arrived for those 4 drivers: Gibbs, Truex, Keselowski, and Burton. Number 4, solid nights for many of our playoff contenders. A lot of the drivers coming in above the cutoff line needed to have a solid run on Saturday night to get themselves into the next round of the playoffs, and that's what a lot of them did. Let's start things off with Kyle Larson's teammate, Chase Elliott, who finished runner-up to Kyle Larson and was able to advance the next round of the playoffs. He came in 30 points and just needing to finish well and get stage points to advance the next round. And that's what the 9 team did. They started in the top 10, weren't as low as 12th all on Saturday night, got stage points in both stages, but he also had some really good pit stops and some great restarts when we had those. He was able to pass a few guys, and in the long runs, his car was really, really good, but it was not able to keep up with the 5 car. Despite that, it was his best performance by far since his win at Texas earlier this year. Now with the momentum like that, a solid run like that, let's see how they can carry it forward in this next round where he's won at all 3 of these tracks. Then we've got Denny Hamlin, who came into the night below the cutoff line by 6 points. You would figure a guy who has won 2 of the last 3 races here, that he would have a really good shot to run up front and compete. That's what he did. He got stage points and ran up front in the top 5 pretty much all night. Didn't have anything for the 5 car, but a top 5 with a 4th place finish is enough for Denny Hamlin to make it to the next round. It was a little bit, a good momentum builder for them, considering the first 2 races, it was not looking so good for Denny. And then Christopher Bell at a track where he's also been very, very strong at in the past. I felt like he was going to do a lot better and maybe play, second fiddle to Kyle Larson a lot of the night and maybe even keep up with him and pressure him late in the race, but it just was not the case. I don't think they had a really good long-run race car. I think it kind of faded on the it was good on short runs, faded on the long runs. But a great performance nonetheless by Christopher Bell and the number 20 team. And then our defending Cup champ Ryan Blaney, they didn't qualify well, but they worked their way up through the field and had a really good long-run race car that was able to get some stage points in stage 2 and finished inside the top 10 at the end of the night with a 6th place run. So big shout out to the 12 team. And then Alex Bowman, what a first round for him. The solid run at Atlanta, the solid stage points he accumulated at the Glen, and starting on the pole for Saturday night's race at Bristol, he did everything right. He ran up front a lot of the race, got stage points in both stages, but I think as the race gotten longer and we got a little bit of rubber kicked into the racetrack, it kind of took the handling away from the 48 car. But still, he was able to finish inside the top 10, and he's on his way to the round of 12 as well. So the 12 drivers that will advance to the next round of the playoffs: Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, William Byron, Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Tyler Reddick, Chase Elliott, Joey Logano, Alex Bowman, Austin Cindric, Chase Briscoe, and Daniel Suarez. Those 12 drivers still remain alive in this championship battle. And number 5, the racing at Bristol. Yeah, it was nothing like the spring race. The spring race was so much fun with the tire fall off and the soft tire that NASCAR brought in that race. It was a lot of fun seeing these guys slipping and going backwards, left and right, tire failures. It was absolutely off the chains racing. I really enjoyed that. A lot of people enjoyed that. And we were kind of hoping we would see some of that even in differing weather conditions, and being in the nighttime, we'd hope we'd see that Saturday night. Well, that was not the case, as NASCAR was brought a little bit of a harder tire this time, and they instead of the spring race where they didn't put any resin down, they did for this race. And even though both grooves worked for the most part, the bottom groove, the top groove, both grooves were able to work. And when we got into some long runs, there was some side-by-side battles. Of course, it was tough to pass, but it was nothing like we hoped that we would have for this race like we had in the spring race earlier this year. So a little bit of a bummer, and still trying to figure out the racing on the short track with this next-gen car. It's still a little bit of a work in progress. I know I've been saying that now. It's the third year of this car, and we still haven't really seen the short track race we've all been waiting for with this next-gen car, although the spring race, I think, is a main exception. But NASCAR is still trying to work on making the short track racing with this next-gen car productive for the drivers and entertaining for the fans. So still going to work on it. I mean, it's tough right now, but it doesn't mean that they're not trying at all. Now we are on to a new round of the playoffs. The round of 12 kicks off this upcoming Sunday at Kansas Speedway. And if we have the type of racing and maybe the finish that we had earlier this year at this race this upcoming Sunday, boy, oh boy, we're in for a show. We've got the 1.5 mile track that is Kansas. We've got the super speedway that is Talladega, the chaos that it brings. But nothing gets more chaotic than the Charlotte Roval, the last race in the round of 12. This round will ultimately cut the playoff grade in half. At the end of this round, 8 drivers will advance on. We haven't started this round yet, but who do you think has got a chance to advance? Who gets in and who does not advance? We're going to find out. And what will happen this upcoming Sunday, Kansas? Will Kyle Larson be able to, live up to that thrilling win that he had earlier this year? Will Chris Buescher get some revenge? Or will one of our other playoff drivers come out on top Sunday and punch their ticket and not having to worry about Talladega? We shall find out, but I guarantee you everybody is going to be on their A game on Sunday. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Subscribe, like, and congrats once again to Kyle Larson and the 5 team on their big win Saturday night at Bristol. And congrats to the 12 drivers that advanced to the round of 12. Have a great week, everybody. Let's go racing!